Welcome once again to Boys Don't Cry, quote unquote. Yes, and I explained the reason for that. Well, this week I am excited because finally I get to speak to one of the individuals who I've reached out to her after seeing the kind of feedback and the encouragement and the questions that she has been posting and extending towards me, in addition to my experience working with her in one of my another lifetimes. So, without further ado, because of the interactions and the influence I have seen her exert by just virtue of being in the same room with people of different ages, different backgrounds, and different skill sets. Because of all that and the expertise she brings to this topic, I welcome Irma Flores Brothers to Boys Don't Cry. Irma, welcome. How are
Thank
you?
you, Umair. I'm so excited to be here. I think there is so much passion that I have for our young lives and how they develop as they continue to grow. And I love the world we live in, but I know there's a lot of work to be done. So I'm honored to be part of a podcast that I learned so much from, and your posts always cause me to reflect on my views and my philosophy on life. So thank you for honoring me and allowing me to be part of this mission.
Absolutely, my pleasure. So, before we get into my questions and some discussion, I would want you to take a few moments to introduce yourself. I want the audience to know the person I'm speaking with, the experience the person brings, Irma brings, and yeah, so over to you.
Okay, so I've been in education since I was very young. I mean, it started with me playing with stuffed animals and being the teacher. And I followed that passion through. So I have been in the public schools, I have taught at all levels. I started out in the classroom for 8 years and quickly moved up to being a demonstration classroom, then working in the gifted and talented office to assistant principal to principal. So I was administrator for over twice the number of years I was in the classroom. So I learned a lot by viewing what was happening in interactions. And then I've taught at the college level, which I saw the continuation of behaviors that are exhibited when parenting is affected in a sometimes positive, sometimes not so positive way. And I think our lives, our young lives, are so important that although I'm retired, I'm still continuing to pursue that any opportunity I have to influence or share my perspective. So I hope that I bring a lot of knowledge or at least thoughts that we can all send and start that discussion with each other that I think is so vital to our success.
It certainly is. And did I not tell you guys that I've got just the right person to talk to today? So, without further ado, let's jump right into it. I asked the same question, posted it to my first guest, Sohail, and I'm going to ask you the same thing with a certain addition there is how difficult is still this topic in 2025, boys, young adult boys, adult men, how difficult is it still to talk about, hey, how are you feeling? How would you like to express? So, in short, talking about mental health in this time and age that we are living in terms of your experience and what you've seen. And then we'll go from there.
Okay, so I think that I'm so glad that you brought up about mental health because I don't think that parents realize the depth of the damage that could be done when we're not building up and developing their children's self-esteem, particularly in males. I think we put a lot of pressure on our boys to be a certain type based on our culture or our practices or whatever it is. But there are some, if we look at prisons, we see the damage that has been done. And in my experience, I have seen children who, and I used to be the teacher that they would place hard to handle children in my classroom because I could form that bond with them. I mean, I had a little boy that would bite my hand or attempt to if I was working with another student. That right there told me he wasn't receiving the nurturing, the love, the attention that he needed. So I can just do so much. Teachers can do so much in the classroom. Teachers have to, or reach out to parents and almost train the parents on how to parent. And as an administrator on my campuses, I had to have some of those either one-on-one meetings or I started small groups at school through PTA meetings or just separate meetings about how do we interact. So I had joined up with Campfire and talked about how do we sit down together at a meal. So I guess it was one evening a month, we would have dinner and everyone would bring a meal or a dish and we would share that and we would all sit together. That's the dad and all of the children, and we would have discussions that should be occurring in the home with the children involved. And then after the meal, we would all help to clean up. So it was modeling what is a family structure? What does it look like? What kind of discussions should take place? A lot of kids are growing up not knowing how do they do that. And I think we're missing a large piece and it's affecting the children in the school. So I think as many opportunities as we can get out in the community and share those uh, practices and teach, because we do have cultures that maybe aren't used to or they don't practice, or the adults sit at a separate table than the children, or they sit at different times to have a meal, or they go to their rooms. We need to bring the families together. It's going to make a big difference, but we have to educate. So I see a lot of the effects of not happening in the home.
So you brought up a very, I picked up on something where you mentioned the kid would try to bite. Um, so if there is an instance where, say, teachers have such a kid in their classroom or in their session, what skill set is needed, one, to be able to identify some of that gap that the kid is experiencing in their home setup or domestic setup or whatever that is, certain skill set, and then how do you identify that as an opportunity? Because if and when you do speak with parents, there's going to be some pushback. Hey, what do you mean? There's a gap. No, our kid is perfect. Our home system is perfect. So, two things here I would like to shed some light on. A skill set that helps teachers, administrators identify this situation, because in some people it is inherent. They're born with this instinct. Some people have to learn it. And then how does that conversation go?
I think that one, hopefully teachers are going into the profession for the right reasons because it's not for the pay. Let's just be honest, it's not. For everything, if people would get in to observe what skill sets and what behaviors and the attitudes and the just stress level of teachers in the classroom. Having one or two students in a classroom that are like the one that I mentioned is a good day. Typically, you have five or six that don't know how to self control, self regulate, and they don't have those communication skills. So you have to go into that profession knowing there are going to be challenges and you cannot take it personally, but you have to be there for the right reason. And I think too often inexperienced educators react instead of monitoring, because they're going to be some of those children you look at and you think, oh gosh, he's going to be a challenge. But if you turn it around, you think, okay, I can make a difference. I can change this child's life. Maybe he's not going to get it at home, but he can find a safe place here in my classroom. And I think developing that relationship with that child is key to why I was happy to drive to work every day. It was not looked at as a burden, it was looked at as a challenge that I could achieve something that was going to make a difference in a child's life. And not only his, but it was going to affect the rest of the children in the classroom by observing how we were interacting. There are people that don't know how to respond in this world. So I think that if we continue to set those standards in the classroom, hopefully they get a little bit of that they can carry on with them, because we cannot assume that every child with a broken home is not going to make it in life. For some, it drives them. Like you said, all of them are different. They're raised differently, they're born differently. So some of them just have it in themselves. And I used to tell my children, my dad passed away when I was a year old in a car accident. So I had a mom who raised three of us. I was a year old. I could have used that as an excuse to go down the wrong path. But I had a mother, thank goodness, that had been an orphan. She was had a hard life, but she had it within her to dedicate her life to her children. She was spiritual. She was a Catholic. She was had very high expectations, and I won't tell you that I don't think anyone could measure up to her expectations. I mean, and I used to tell her, the Pope doesn't even measure up to your expectations. But it helped me be who I am. And I know that in my workplace, people would describe me as being hard. But to balance that, there's a compassion. So you have to appear disciplined and you have to set standards. But with that comes a lot of nurturing and love and understanding, not to the point where the child gets away with it, but that I'm able to teach them about life. And in life, I think we are not teaching our children consequences. So when parents don't have that skill to teach that there are consequences because they didn't get it themselves, because maybe they're in the same situation and a parent is on parole, or they're, incarcerated, they've missed that important part about consequences of our actions. And I think balancing that with what our job is to educate is a hard job. And that's why I just think that we need to advocate for teachers, but we need to give them the skills that they need to have in the classroom. There needs to be patience, because easily I could have had him reported out of my classroom. I don't want him in there. He's hurt me. He's going to hurt others. But I just took it in as this child. This is a sign that he needs more love.
Right.
And I can provide the activities for him to grow and develop skills that he needs to be a better him.
So I'm glad you brought that up because so many times, and it still happens in every field of life, that we start focusing on the symptom instead of focusing or trying to identify the root cause behind the symptom. And then we start try to treat the symptom instead of working on the root cause. So another question is, how does the mental state of the kids, and then let's say they're progressing through elementary to middle to high over the course of years, not being able to one identify what's happening and then be able to speak with someone, could it be a teacher, a counselor, how does that eventually start impacting their academic life And then there's social life also, and how far-reaching impacts there are. Is it different for every kid of every stage, or are there certain um, flags that we can see or maybe learn to see?
So, in one of the questions that you brought up, there's so much to discuss on this topic. It's just there's just so many factors that come into play that I didn't really respond enough to how do we reach out to the parent. And that can be very tricky. I think that when you go in with the attitude that one, they know you have reached out enough in a positive way, because it cannot all be negative. There has to be that relationship that you formed with those parents, and you have to, through that relationship, show that we're in this together. I'm not judging. I'm here to help, because none of us have a perfect life. None of us escape the challenges of the world. We just face it. We turn on the TV. We're dealing with it. It's in our homes. However, it doesn't matter the education level. We all have those frustrations, and how we play them out affects us on a daily basis. So when I would reach out to parents, they knew me. As a teacher, they knew me. As an administrator, they knew me. I was at the front door welcoming students in the morning. I was calling parents. I was inviting them in. My door was never closed. My door was always open. If they needed to meet with me, yes, call me. I'm going to be available. So having that kind of reputation that you're open to whatever they need. My door is open to you. Come, let's talk about how we can fix it. That's not to say that I didn't have challenges and some parents who fought me all the way, but you do the best you can. And even when we had discussions with a parent and the teacher present, there were times that after that meeting, I had to educate the teacher on this was not conducive to a positive meeting. The way you responded, your behavior, your gestures, your facial expressions, all of that goes into play with how the parent is going to receive it. And there's a saying, no matter how hard you dance, not everyone will clap. And I live with that, and it was given to me because I would take things to heart. I would carry it with me, and it would affect me because I wanted so much for there to be a positive outcome. So when we're dealing with mental states of a child, and we recognize that it's beyond just the child getting what they want, or there's something deeper in there. It's those conversations that you have with parents that help them see. And sometimes it was a parent saying, you know what, I need to get them on medication. Well, I didn't always feel like that was the best first option. Let's wait. What if we did this? But me meeting with those parents gave me insight to what we were dealing with. You can learn a lot about a person's environment, their beliefs, when you have those one-on-one conversations. That would guide me to know, where do I go with this situation to have a positive outcome. And I will say that I'm proud of still having those relationships with many of my parents, and some that I think about all the time. I still wonder, where are those children, and did they make it? Are they okay? I know their names. I mean, I'm 64, but you still remember the first ones you had that you worried about, and they stay with you. So I think addressing mental health comes without having to say there's a mental issue. I think
Right.
providing them the resources, knowing the strengths of our staff, helped out. I think without sharing confidential information, you know, I was originally in Fort Worth after graduating from TCU, so I was with the Fort Worth ISD. I made a lot of connections there, so I could um, combine the need that that child had and use that resource that I had to refer the parent to help. And maybe they weren't monetarily, financially able to afford. There are places that can help give them some guidance. So I think it's all in the way we present ourselves and the reputation that we have. Do we show ourselves as we're there to work with the parent? Are we on a team? Or are we above that parent because we're more educated? Mhm.
So you hit a very good point, which I want to pick up on again, medication.
Mhm.
How, if and when parents bring that up, because they've been hearing it, and we are a very medication happy society in everything. Instead of looking at the kid's symptoms and the root cause that I spoke about. So, if and when this conversation comes up, how easy or how hard it is to have that discussion with the parents that no, you do not need medication right now. What you need is certain steps of actions that we need to take in order to help understand whether there is a need of medication or not, or is it just a behavioral work that we need to do over the course of time? How hard is that conversation? Because I suppose it is not easy.
It is, and then you have to be really careful not to cross that line because I'm not a medical professional. But I think knowing the facts and sharing those with the parents. This is what I'm seeing in the classroom. Whether I was a teacher or administrator, if I was the administrator, I was in those classrooms to observe that child so that I could have those conversations. Because just making blanket statements like I never want to do about any culture or um, sex or any other thing, generalizing, it's not fair. So when I do have my facts and I have enough information to portray that child and what is going on in the classroom, um, you have to show that sometimes it's out of the child's control. And when all steps have been taken, and we would have these working lunches, this was particularly in Fort Worth because I've worked in different environments. I've worked in the environment where they were middle to upper class. It's a very different conversation there. I've worked in where I was the minority. I went into a predominantly Anglo school and I had to face a lot of discrimination. So I had to build that trust among the parents that I knew what I was doing. And it wasn't about the car I drove or the purses I carried. It was about being there for the children. And I did that through demonstrating the starting a father's club, getting fathers involved as I was not, because it was mainly moms who would contribute. Then I've been to the schools where it was on, heavily bilingual, but those parents were involved. It was standing room only at my PTA meetings, but I also had to have. I didn't have to. I chose to have like door prizes. So I would reach out to companies and say, "Can you donate?" Pier One was one of my biggest contributors, and they would provide a basket with goodies. Well, who can't use? Or I would go out to buy the essentials, and that would be another gift that we would share with the staff, with the parents. So I think that you have to be ready for the pushback, but you have to have your facts. You have to show the parents this is what we're dealing with. Is it the same at home? If it is, then okay, let's figure out together what are we doing? Because sometimes it's other children using that child as scapegoat, and a child can just take so much of that being blamed and that bullying, that if a teacher's not aware, and I've been in situations these past 2 years, I did teach. I came out of retirement, thank goodness, to the district I was working with. And I was able to do that. And I worked with newcomers, children from other countries. And I learned a lot about that culture. But even though language was a barrier, there was a system for how to communicate with them. And I learned very quickly how these children are expected to behave in the classroom. And I might say these were the best behaved, motivated children I have ever seen.
Wow.
But it's not always like that. But they get a bad rap because they're not from here. And I don't want to get into that because that's a whole other discussion.
Right.
I
Right.
am speaking as an educator, and what I experience is that we cannot look at a child and assume we know enough about them without really getting to know them. We cannot just say, take this pill, it's going to fix them. Because I will say that there were times that I had to call parents in and say, you need to speak with your doctor because this child, there's no emotion. They're just like physically a
We've
zombie.
exhausted every behavioral aspect of reinforcement or working, and now we need some more help.
Right. So there
Okay.
are other things. Visit with a counselor. But then before we did that, it was talk to the counselor, let them know what we're dealing with, so that maybe a child went in there and they aren't used to sharing because, like you said, the culture is you don't share your feelings.
Right.
So it takes a really strong counselor who knows what they're doing to bring that child to the level where they can share their concerns. And that's where we found out about things that were on in the home that were abusive. And we had to, by law, we had to
Right.
report it to CPS. I'll never forget the story, The Trials of Gabriel Fernandez. I don't know if you ever saw that.
Oh,
It was, it will always stay with me. That is it happens far too much, but it was the parents, the mother and the boyfriend who were abusive to Gabriel, and the teachers seeing it, but nobody was reaching out. Nobody was saving this child. So I think we need to be observant. Back in the day, we could take pictures of bruises. We're not allowed to do that, but we are
right.
held to call CPS, call the authorities, and get someone in there to help that family, but save that child.
Right. I'm going to complicate this equation now.
Okay.
The kid is already having difficulties working with people, working with teachers, working with his classmates, and we can take any kid, elementary, middle, high. Let's stick to middle, let's say. And now you are adding extracurricular activities and pressures, and then you're adding academic pressure. Now he or she is no longer an elementary school student. Now there's a certain degree of expectations that, okay, you're approaching high school, you've got to start getting serious now. So how do these stressors, positive or negative, however different people look at them, add to the already complicated mix of a muddled mental state for that child, plus the parents at home and the teachers that are going to be working with that kid?
So again, there are schools where after school activities just don't occur. The parents don't have access to that, or they're at work. And I think we need to be cognizant that it's that's not the norm really much anymore. I have been in the campuses where after school activities were important and part of the growth of that child. And I appreciated that because I think the arts are so important. I try to always incorporate those into my classroom and into the school, bringing in creative days where we would hold like a gallery where parents could come and view the child's artwork, because we know a lot of our minority children are very artistic. They have that creative side of their brain is more influential than the other side where they're not as analytical. So I think that those after school activities help build a child. So when you're including those, and I can clearly remember one incident where a child, it was one of the schools where it was high performing, and I was the minority in that on that campus. But calling the teacher was insisting that the child do homework, and it was a balance. But she aces everything. Really, if this child knows, we need to make sure we understand what the purpose of homework is, because that too can add the frustration to the child. They're dealing with after school stressors, which a lot of parents hold the child back because they want them to have that extra year of growth for football or soccer, whatever the sport is. And I think that we have to help parents see that there has to be a balance. Is there enough time for that? And I watch videos all the time where the mom is like, oh, I have to make a quick meal because we have to go on to practice. When is that child getting time with the family? It is a hard call. So I think that if they are in all those after school activities, what are our weekends looking like? They're the games. Well, what about after the game? What are we doing as a family to help support that child's mental growth? Are we having those conversations with them? Um, so it is, every child is different, but I think we as parents have to find ways. I had my children in the kitchen cooking with me because I was a principal. I was very busy. When I was at after school meetings, PTA meetings, and that, they were with me. I did a lot of public speaking. They were behind the stage with me, but they were exposed to my profession. They were exposed to how to behave when I'm not there. My oldest one, Robert, took care of the little one, but I didn't want them with a babysitter. I just wanted them with me because I knew as a principal, I had to balance being a parent with a husband who worked out of town. So I was with them and they were my life. And thank goodness they all are, we are very close. We're very strong. In fact, my oldest one is renewing his vows, and my son will be the best man, and my daughter's going to be one of the bridesmaids. So we're very, very close, but we clearly communicate with each other our frustrations. We clearly communicate our wins, our we champion each other. But I brought them up that together, it's the things that we teach our children about how you treat your siblings teaches other people how to treat them. And I
Yes.
think my mom, being as hard as she was, almost raised me to be too respectful, because I think sometimes people take advantage of that because they know you're not going to retaliate, or you're going to take the responsibility even if it wasn't yours. So I think that children learn a lot by watching. They watch my interaction with other teachers as a teacher. They were watching that, and they pick up on that. But I allowed that environment to be, you can ask me questions because it's part of their growth, particularly with those that were learning the English language. They
Right.
were learning our culture. So how we demonstrate a conversation, especially for our boys, is vital to their success.
Right. I think for me it's a hard question, but I think I'm pretty sure you're gonna ace it. It just came to me. Are there any, say, one or two things that educators uh, can If they're dealing with an elementary kid versus middle school kid versus high school kid, if I'm a teacher, I'm a new teacher, if I have no idea how to deal with it, is there a starter kit question or a diagnostic question in my head that I can start with and then go from there and get Irma's help or some senior colleagues' help because I have no idea how to deal with these things. Is there such cheat sheet, maybe one or two things that I, as a new educator, can fall back on, being an elementary, being a middle, being a high school educator?
I think that's so, so important. I love that you brought that up because I love mentoring young, new teachers. If we're going to keep them, we need to mentor them. We need to give them the support they need to be ready to face the challenges. And challenges are not always bad. They're not always difficult. They can be a source of our strength. They can be a way that we grow and continue to learn. I think that as a new teacher, you're going to get challenges. Your attitude has to be, what can I do to help this situation turn it around? Because it is affecting all the other children. There's no getting away from it. The attention we give that one or two or five or six students that are in our classroom that are challenges takes away from the other children. So the environment I establish, and I would be telling a brand new teacher, from day one, you establish your expectations. The end of the day, you end it with a hug and what a great day. I can't wait to see you tomorrow, to give them something forward to look forward to. It doesn't matter what level you're on. And I think that we treat children differently from elementary to high school. And I had the privilege of being a substitute administrator in Austin ISD at one of the most challenging high schools that had been featured on the daily news about the state taking over because of its discipline, um, uh, 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 absence records. The scores, state scores, were very low. And I had accepted that position. They called on a Friday and said, "Would you be willing to help us? There's a administrator on leave." And I said, "Oh yeah," because I loved going to Austin and working in the high schools because I never had that opportunity to lead a high school, and I wish I had. So I went to that high school after I saw that, oh my gosh, the one that's on the news right now is the one that I'm going to be at.
Wow.
So I was a little um, anxious, but within myself, I have these talks driving to the place. I can do this. I can do this. They're going to be better off because I'm going to be there. I'm going to support the children. And they are still, I think in high school, they're still our children. Yes, they're young adults, but they're still learning. And we can't assume that they have all the skills that they need. So driving there, one of my best experiences ever in my career. I walked the hallways, sometimes frightened, especially for cafeteria duty, because this was not a environment that I had grown up in, nor had I taught in. It was, if you can imagine, high schoolers that, you know, just had a different way of thinking, and they were much taller than I was because I'm about 5'2", and so I was looking up to them and hoping that no fight would break out because that was the reputation of the school. What I did was I observed and I picked up on some of the students that had challenges. And I had to call one in because the teacher had written him up, called him in, and had a long talk with him. Next day, written up again. He came into my office, what's going on? And he started to express his concern with the teacher. And I said, okay, but you have to understand, she's got 25, 27 other students in there. Don't be part of the problem. Okay, how can we work together so that you go in there, you get what you need, and you go on to the next classroom without it having to be reported. So it got to the point where I finally had to call the parent. Well, he said, my mom's not going to show up. I said, she will, she will. I spoke to her and I said, I really need you here. I want to help him. He's a good boy. She never showed up.
Wow.
So from then on, I knew this is a child who didn't have that support all along. So it doesn't matter what age they are acting out, they are asking for help. And if we're not ready to listen and provide the nurturing, it doesn't cost anything to just sit there and listen. You have to be careful because you don't want to be accused of something. But I think that again, your reputation shows, and I would tell new teachers, reach out, observe the staff, connect with someone who has experience working with that population.
Right.
You don't have to be, sharing specifics. Go to the teacher that was with them last year, but that's not always the answer because sometimes that teacher doesn't have the patience or didn't have the patience. And so this group of children that have been with this child, they continue to use that child as a scapegoat or to bully that child. So I
Right.
think the next step is find someone you can trust that has that experience. And luckily, a lot of new teachers would come to me and I would make myself available. If you need anything, I would sit with them or try to just say, in faculty meetings, as a teacher, being an administrator, going to teaching is the best thing I ever did because I was able to contribute during our meetings. And that showed the rest of the staff, okay, she might be someone that I can go to and ask for
Right.
help. So somebody has to be that spokesperson. And I feel like I tried to do that while I was back in the classroom. But ultimately, you have to be careful with some administrators, unfortunately, because they see that as a negative on the teacher and can then start um, a path that isn't fair to that first year teacher just
Right.
learning how to deal with these really critical issues.
So it's a double-edged sword, really,
It
for
is.
the educator who's just starting out new and he's trying to learn the right ways and right things to do and execute. So, further complicate things as we draw to a close almost is how has AI, now that is such an integral part of everything that we're doing, working on laptops, working on Chromebooks, working through Zoom, COVID came and went. How has that maybe helped or made it hard to have that connection and have that rapport with the kids, even with the parents, as we try to understand and continue to understand the evolution of the kids that we work with from an educator's perspective.
I thought about AI last night and I thought, gosh, that would be another topic to really dive into.
Mhm.
Um, I was not as familiar with AI than I have been in the last few months. I've really become more comfortable. It's a positive, it's a negative. Because I think it possibly, and I'll refer to a job site, professional job site. I think it's taking away individuals' uniqueness in how we portray ourselves and how we communicate. I think that we have to be very careful that AI, we teach children how to use it as a strength, but how to limit its use because we don't want to take away from the knowledge of students. I'm not clear, on everything that AI does. I know that there are some things that people put on, Facebook or social media that is AI generated.
Right.
But I do think that it can help with our language, developing writing skills, which I am passionate about. I want to write, and the things that I love, I always try to get the children to find that passion. That may be I love creative writing, I love hand lettering. So just finding ways that we inspire children to learn more and be better is great. But I think that we have to monitor how our children are using AI, and not allow it to take over the production of what children give us as their knowledge base. If we don't know the children well enough, then they could submit a paper that was AI generated. And I worry about that at the high school level, where you have so many classes, you don't get that one on one time with students. You can, but a lot of teachers are overwhelmed with all the other responsibilities they have, that it is hard. As an administrator, I found a way to reach out to those kids, and those kids that were written up were the ones I knew needed me. So I think that teaching them how to use AI in our world in a productive way is going to be vital to how it impacts them and their life.
Yep,
I- I'm still
absolutely.
I'm still iffy on it, and I'm still learning about it. So
Right. Oh, so many of us are. Every day there's something new. So as you mentioned, yes, this can be a whole different discussion on its own. Yes. So coming to a close, parents, from an educator's perspective, maybe a suggestion or a best practice or one thing that parents who have absolutely no idea how to deal with the situation, they're trying different things at home, regardless again of the grade level. What's one thing as a starter kit parents can start doing that can maybe help establish that bridge or strengthen that bridge or develop that rapport where high schoolers who just want to be left alone, who want their privacy, uh, to be able to have that connection and communication, that traffic, two-way traffic? What would be one of those things that you as an educator and also parent would suggest? A simple but something that can be tried by parents at home.
to relieve all parents and educators, there is no handbook that's going to teach you how to do this. It's the experience and the conversations you have with the people around, the reading about different, because every situation is different. And as we continue to progress with technology and all those other avenues that are afforded to us, it's going to change the way we communicate. The bottom line is communication. Reach out to those parents. Teachers reach out to those parents. But as a parent, I made myself available. I couldn't cross that line where I was, as the administrator on a campus, I respected the teacher to do the job. And I remember teachers coming to me and saying, I want for next year, I want my child in this teacher's classroom. Well, they all wanted the same teacher. And at the next faculty meeting, I said, that should never be happening. All of us should be at the level where every child is treated the way we would want our own child treated.
Right.
So I think that once you make that communicate, and it can't be meet the teacher night, that's just not enough. I think it's communicating through an email, not driving them crazy, not everyday emails. How did they do today? They can't do that. But I think making yourself as a parent available and saying, I'm here if they need anything. I'm so excited that you're going to be their teacher, and then supporting them, providing them, getting notes back as soon as they send them out. That's another way that you're communicating with the teacher that you're involved. Getting their homework done, signing it that you saw it. They don't ask for that maybe, but those kind of signals um, demonstrate to the teacher that you're an involved parent. I remember when I was an administrator, my youngest son was at a different school, and he came home one day and he was so upset, and he said, I was so embarrassed in class today. And I said, why? And they said, well, he said, the teacher said it real loud, your mother is breathing down our backs. And I said, what? And I thought, but I never have done that. So I said, well, Stephen, I'm sorry. He goes, God, that was embarrassing. And I said, that shouldn't have happened. Thank you for telling me. And he goes, and I said, what are you comfortable with? And he said, no, Mom, don't say anything because it's going to make it worse. And I thought, how sad that our children feel that they if they come and tell us what's happening in the classroom, that the teacher, if they find out, is going to hold it against them. So I had to think about this. How am I going to, handle this? Well, first of all, I thought, well, she's portraying me in an unsavory way. I mean, I don't feel like I breathe down my children's teacher's neck, but I'm there as a support.
Right.
So I ended up calling and I spoke to the counselor first. She said, oh, she's a very good friend of mine. I'm sure she didn't say that. So her message was my son was lying. And I thought, he just, my kids are pretty open with me. I'm not saying they don't lie or they're perfect because they're jokesters. You know,
Right.
comedy is not foreign to them in the classroom like it wasn't to their mom. So I spoke to the teacher, and she's Miss Brothers. I am so sorry. I did say that. And I thought, okay, this counselor assumed because she knew her. We all make mistakes.
Right.
And as parents, we have to be okay with, you know what, that hurt his feelings, but I can understand you're overwhelmed, you're frustrated. Keep that conversation going with the teacher when it's appropriate for the
Right.
appropriate things. I think teachers get frustrated when it's like, I want to know every day how his behavior is. That's not fair to the teacher. But I think just making yourself available, start with the teacher always, have that communication, but keep clear records, whether it be email, and then I want to meet, requesting a meeting. Let the teacher know what it's about pertaining to his grades or the behavior on Friday. Be as specific as you can. Keep everything in writing. Meet with that teacher. Listen. Don't assume your child is not guilty of it because they do act differently when they're not in our sights. Sometimes they act the same way, but typically they're gonna have that peer pressure, and you have to understand they're not perfect, they're growing, they're learning, it's not a big deal, they're gonna grow out of it,
Right.
hopefully. And then just keep a record if you're getting nowhere and you're getting pushback from that teacher or teachers, or you feel like, okay, all these in middle and high school, the three teachers and I'm by myself, I feel like it was three against one. Then you call an administrator in. You have the right to advocate for your child. And sometimes we advocate because we don't understand. We don't understand the context in which it happened. We don't understand the academic level that is required of your child. And sometimes a teacher doesn't understand that there's a gap there. The foundation wasn't built. So they're going to have to understand that maybe this happened last year at that school or whatever. They're brand new to the profession. They weren't there to observe how it affected the children. Say COVID. There were a lot
Right.
of things the teachers had to go back and fill in those holes, those gaps. So I think my message is communicate, 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 and be open and learn from each other. Don't assume that just because you're the parent that you have all the answers. Learn to be a better parent. As a teacher, learn to be a better communicator. Obviously, the parent may not teach them the academics, but they can teach them how to communicate to have a positive outcome. And I always told teachers, you start with a positive and you end on a positive, because
Right.
nobody wants to hear just negativity about their child. That's their life. And we need to be more aware of each other's feelings and where we're coming from, and understand and accept that. But we need to clearly listen. I think a lot of times people sit and they're more concerned with their response rather than hearing and saying, okay, what I'm hearing you say, what I understand is this, because I can relate that to the classroom. And maybe if we did this, you want to do that at home? Maybe they're not just not getting enough sleep,
Right.
whatever it is, but communicate those needs. Something happens at home, get a message to that teacher. He may not be in the best mood. The teacher is then mentally prepared
Prepared.
to deal with the child. And I used to tell my students, things happen at home that you are out of your control. They're dealing with adult problems. If you come to school and you need something, like you're upset about something, mom and dad had a fight or whatever, you come and let me know, because if that child's mind is not clear, how can we expect them to take in knowledge? And I never
Right.
sent my children to school upset. I hope that they will agree. I tried never, I was going to deal with it after school, but never going to school crying. It just, I couldn't. It would have ruined my whole day.
That is a beautiful thought. And that's something I've tried to start implementing for the last couple of years at least, because I read it somewhere. I think it was somewhere that, okay, you're letting the kid off the car when you just had an argument, and then you're telling the kid, oh, have a great day. What is the kid going to think? What are you, nuts? You just shouted at me for this, and now you're saying have a good day, like
Right.
whatever. All right, so many things to talk about, but fascinating conversation. Thank you very much for that last bit, also for parents. And what I want to piggyback on as we close our conversation today with Irma is there are three stakeholders to this equation. Uh, it's the parents, it's
Right.
the educators, and the single most important pillar of this conversation is the kid, the student, the boy, who is the stakes in this. So we absolutely need to be aware of that, put our differences aside, speak with each other, communicate with each other, share expectations with each other. We may not agree on those, but we want to find a middle ground. We don't need to, we want to. It has to come from within to be able to do that, to keep that progress going, to contribute towards those lives where one day when they are a managing director or they have their successful workshop, three workshops or one workshop, they can think back and say, oh, you know what? That teacher, if it had not been for that educator, I would not have been here. So thank you very much, Irma, for this. Any parting words before we close?
I wish I could reach out to all of your viewers and say, call me if you have, because I can advise you, at least help you walk through, because it is scary for parents. But I think that you just have to stand your ground with being open to, let's work together. This is a team effort, and not all educators are prepared to do that. So you have to give them a little grace as they get to know you and get to grow. Obviously, your child cannot afford to wait. So read up, talk to people, get involved in any activities they have at the school. But thank you so much for this opportunity, because I think that the more that we do find people that have experienced it, can lower the anxiety of people who are going through it. And that's what I hope that I have done today, is just provide. And there are so many stories I could tell that have touched my life in such meaningful ways, why I want to continue in education. It can be a beautiful life, and it can be a beautiful experience, but it takes all of us learning and growing together, and being aware of what's out there. Not that we can protect our children, but we can prepare them for how to react. And I think it's how we demonstrate how we behave and how we act reflects on our children. And let me say, parents, I told my kids, how you behave reflects on me as a parent. And that has stayed with them. And I always told them, carry your last name proudly. You don't want a teacher saying, oh my gosh, I have the brothers. Yeah, I got to deal with those parents. You want there to be, oh my gosh, I have that parent, I have that child. They're so polite, they're so respectful. Being respectful does not mean they're not going to be a challenge, but I think you have to be ready to accept that child for who they are and take them as far as you can. So, with that, I want to wish you the best as a parent because I know that you're a great dad in what you are doing and just listening to how you think. They are blessed to have great parents that are paving that way to success. And I'm proud to say that I am a friend of Umair Khan, and I'm very proud of you. And I want you to continue because I am right there with you watching your podcast and learning from you. So thank you.
My pleasure. Yes, continue. We will. And one thing that I want to close this with is, again, I read this somewhere. It completely changed the way I started to think about 3, 4 years ago. We cannot prepare the world for our kids. What we have to do is prepare our kids for the world they're going to enter. And I keep telling them now for about 2 years or so, I'm not going to be here forever. My job is to teach you whatever I've learned, teach you from mistakes I've made, teach you from lessons that I've taken, so that the day that comes that I'm not here, I want you to be able to not make such grave mistakes so that you have something to lean back on. But no matter what happens, I will be standing right behind you no matter what happens in life. So, with that, thank you very much for another session of Boys Don't Cry. Today, our guest was Irma Flores Brothers. What an amazing conversation. And I can already see that we're going to have her back with so many different dimensions of this conversation. If you liked anything that you saw today, let us know in the comments. If you did not like something, even more importantly, I want to know because the goal is to improve. The goal is to learn as we move along. Share it with your friends, families, and anyone you think might need, might want, might make use of this conversation. Till next time, from Boys Don't Cry, this is Umar Khan signing off. Take care.